So I'm about to review probably the most anticipated Big Finish box set of the year. No pressure. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and it's going to be a really interesting year for Big Finish for 2025, and if you are a fan of the Revived series, you're going to be eating really well. We've got the Spy Master, played by Sacha Dhawan, we've got the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, along with Yaz, Mandip Gill, we've also got the 9th Doctor and Rose having a series of adventures together, played by Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper, but one of the most interesting ranges, and I think one of the ranges that allows Big Finish to take the most amount of creative liberties, will be the Fugitive Doctor range, with Joe Martin reprising the role of the titular fugitive incarnation of the Doctor. The script editor of this range is Robert Valentine, so a really safe pair of hands for this particular incarnation. And one of the first things that he and Big Finish did when they were able to get the rights to the Fugitive Doctor for these Big Finish full-cast audio dramas was speak directly to Chris Chibnall to try and figure out what he wanted to do with the character. What was his interpretation, what was his input, basically. And apparently Chris Chibnall said, I don't know where the fugitive incarnation of the Doctor takes place in terms of the Doctor's timeline. I don't know if she's pre-Hartnell, I don't know if she's season 6B, I don't know if she's post-Whittaker or post-Gatwa at this point. So one of the first big creative decisions that Robert Valentine took with this range for Big Finish is that they're essentially going to make sure that the fugitive Doctor herself also does not really know where she fits in or where she comes from. The inciting incident for the Fugitive Doctor Most Wanted, which is the first box set in this upcoming range, has the fugitive escaping Division, which is the Time Lord organization where she's done essentially violent espionage missions for, and apparently she has memories or she has secrets, she's got something in her mind that has been repressed, and Division want to get a hold of it. There's a bounty on the Doctor's head. The Doctor is now piloting their faithful Type 40 TARDIS across time and space to evade capture, which leads into this first trilogy of stories: Fast Times by Robert Valentine, The Legend of Baba Yaga by Roshana Patel, and The Dimension of Lost Things by Lisa McMullen. And of course, leading the charge here is Jo Martin, who made her debut in Doctor Who in 2020, her surprise appearance in Fugitive of the Judoon as this new hidden incarnation of the Doctor. And if you've watched my videos around that era, you'll know that while I think Jo Martin is great casting for the Doctor, and I think that the twist was effectively done, I think that as a character, she had very little actually going for her on the page. Basically, she spends almost all of that story, Fugitive of the Judoon, just yelling through gritted teeth, telling the 13th Doctor to shut up and be quiet, stop talking, cease and desist, there's a good girl. And while plans for the character could have been drastically different, like pre-pandemic, pre-flux, whatever the potential changes were for Series 13, the actual end result, what we got left with, was a character with, in my opinion, very little actually on the page. And any sort of appeal that the character had, any sort of popularity or iconography the character had, is entirely down to A, Jo Martin's performance, and B, that brilliant costume. Another brilliant piece of wardrobe from Ray Holman, who also designed the 13th Doctor's outfit. I just wanted to say all of that up front, just so you know where I stand on the character, so you might kind of know what my expectations were for this particular range. And I will say, if you are after answers as to where the Fugitive Doctor comes from, where she fits into the broader chronology of the series, and the Doctor's personal history, you're not going to get that in this box set. In fact, I have a feeling that you're not going to figure out at all. They could do 10 box sets of the Fugitive Doctor range for Big Finish, and I doubt they'll actually land on a concrete answer. But if you're after a fresh approach to Doctor Who in regards to format and tone, and basically just a different incarnation of the Doctor where the normal rules don't really apply, almost kind of like the War Doctor, but the War Doctor still has that baggage of previous incarnations that he's trying to live up to. But for the Fugitive Doctor, that baggage doesn't really apply, which means that you can tell some really interesting stories. And boy, do they tell some interesting stories. Let's start with Fast Times by Robert Valentine. So like I said, the inciting incident is the Fugitive Doctor has escaped from Division. She's trying to flee across time and space in her TARDIS, but she doesn't get very far. She gets kidnapped by bounty hunters, and she's taken to the Punishment Ship, which is essentially this great big prison ship where bounty hunters can take their captures and leave them there for the people who put out the bounty to come and collect them. The Doctor immediately puts herself on the top of the pecking order by immediately beating beating up the biggest guy that she can see, all in the aid of helping another prisoner, this young woman called Fade, played by Leah Harvey. And Fade is essentially the companion surrogate in this story. And she and a bunch of other prisoners on the punishment ship are trying to engineer a prison break, and since the Doctor has beat up the biggest person in the prison, they need her help as essentially the muscle and also kind of the brains.
Oi, leave her alone. She's half your size.
Walk on. This don't concern you.
Good point. You're right. It doesn't. I'm just very, very opinionated.
Hey, get off! Get off! Please! Mercy!
Tell your friends to let her go.
Let her go! Let her go!
And then never to pick on her again.
You got it.
I'd better.
I swear! I swear!
And that's another thing. Your name's not Big Fish anymore. From now on, your name is Tiddler.
Get off me!
What was that?
Wait! Wait! Oh, okay.
What's your name?
Tiddler. Tiddler. It's Tiddler.
That's right, Tiddler. Now get up!
Oh, my leg.
She and I are walking away. You got that? Now get lost!
You shouldn't have helped me. They'll target you too now.
That's my problem, not yours. Besides, I can take care of myself.
So essentially, the first act of Fast Times is a prison break story. However, living up to its name, Fast Times is kind of more akin to The Chase, written by Terry Nation in the 1960s, where the prison break is essentially the start of a massive adventure throughout all of time and all of space, where the Doctor and Fade are trying to evade capture from a species that destroyed Fade's family and are threatening to destroy her civilization. If you've seen the cover, this is not a spoiler, it's the Daleks, voiced by Nicholas Briggs. Daleks who do recognise the Doctor, but the Doctor does not recognise them. So it's up to the Doctor and Fade to stop the Daleks and also evade capture from Cosmogon, played by Alice Krieger, someone who has been hired by Division to track down and capture the Doctor. We'll get to the story and the other elements of Fast Times in a minute. However, we kind of need to talk about Jo Martin as the Fugitive Doctor, because she absolutely launches out of the gate with this story. Not since Colin Baker in The Sirens of Time back in 1999 has a Doctor actor made such an effective debut in the world of Big Finish, where their incarnation of the Doctor in terms of a vocal performance feels so immediately fully formed. While the Doctor's dialogue in the TV series essentially amounted to exposition, sometimes ADR'd, and also just yelling at the Doctor through gritted teeth, this Doctor in this box set is able to more effectively cut loose, and Jo Martin she completely inhabits that voice recording booth and fully gives her all to the exposition. It's enthralling to listen to her reel off this text, reel off these descriptions, and you just hang on her every word. You can understand why a character like Fade just completely is, I wouldn't say smitten, but why you find her so captivating. You would just follow this person into battle, and with the illusions that we get from her time at Division, many people clearly did. However, while this Doctor does have some traditionally heroic traits, and that's a big part of the conflict of this story with the Doctor and also the bounty hunter Cosmogon, Cosmogon thinking that the Doctor is trying to save people is a way to cause confusion in order to aid her escape, as opposed to the Doctor maybe doing these things across time and space, trying to fix wrongs and make the universe a better place. She couldn't possibly be doing it because it's the right thing to do. No, it's clearly some sort of six-dimensional chess to throw Cosmogon off her scent or whatever. It's an interesting, contrast between these two characters. But also, this Doctor does have quite a bitter streak about her. She knows that she's been exiled from her own people in a very aggressive way, and I think she sort of carries that resentment with her, and also a little bit of self-loathing, maybe the idea that maybe she deserves this sort of punishment, maybe she deserves what's coming to her, but she's still going to go down fighting, she's still going to go down swinging, and sometimes that can result in a little bit of bitterness. And it's an interesting, like, moral grey area for the character. Like, she's not going to be committing genocide like the War Doctor, but then be very mournful about it afterwards. No, it's still like a traditionally heroic character, still trying to find her place in the universe. And also just, like, the little details as well. Like, how she calls her TARDIS old lady. Like, okay, it's a small touch, but that really works for this particular character, for this particular incarnation. And she's also trying to, like, restore her memories and trying to suss out exactly what this particular TARDIS is capable of. There's some, like, interesting meta commentary in regards to the Doctor sort of finding her place in the universe. I know that Robert Valentine, like, explicitly, in terms of the interviews and the text and stuff, isn't saying, like, exactly where this Doctor fits into the continuity, but I think he's leaning in one direction. I think he's leaning pre-Hartnell. I think he's leaning 6B. Definitely, like, black and white era Doctor Who. I can't imagine this being a future incarnation of the Doctor without some massive mind wipe, like, going on. Who knows? But one issue I had with this box set generally is with Cosmogon. And while I did mention that there's an interesting, like, dynamic and contrast between the Doctor and Cosmogon, and the Doctor nicknames her Cosmo because she hates the name Cosmogon, and the bet is basically, I'll stop calling you Cosmo when you catch me. I think while Alice Krieger is giving a really strong performance, there's not a lot to this character. Like, she's not even particularly intimidating. Like, I don't know, like, Alice Krieger can do intimidating, she can do strong and stoic, but there's just not a lot actually on the page yet. She doesn't really seem to, like, justify why the Time Lords would hire her specifically. Like, she doesn't really get, like, a really strong, effective moment, and there's really no threat to the Doctor. It kind of feels like Cosmogon is like a slightly inconvenient thorn at the Doctor's side, as opposed to an active pursuit, an active threat. Now, Cosmogon is, like, front and center on the box set, like, cover for the next Fugitive Doctor set, Dead or Alive, which comes out in July, so maybe Cosmogon will have a much more bigger and active role, but over the course of this box set, I just wasn't feeling Cosmogon as a character. It's still early days for the range, but you only really get one chance at a first impression, and Cosmogon's first impression was pretty underwhelming. And as for the inclusion of the Daleks, there's not a lot really interesting happening in regards to the Daleks. Now, these Daleks are inspired by the Chase, that's the voices that Nicholas Briggs has given them in the story, and it's very, like, Chase-inspired, which is also Fugitive of the Daleks inspired from the first Doctor range last year as well. So, you know, there's a lot of, like, Chase homages going on here, but I think Fugitive of the Daleks did it slightly better. But in terms of this story, it's basically the Doctor and Fade hopping from time zone to time zone, planet to planet, trying to evade capture from the Daleks who are chasing them via time corridor. And because the action is so fast, because they are hopping from place to place, it gives the story a real strong, like, sense of kinetic energy and momentum, which I'm sure Chris Chibnall would definitely appreciate. That's, like, one of the strongest parts of his time as a showrunner, like, the sheer momentum of his stories. In regards to the Daleks as a villain, in regards to the Daleks as characters, there's not a lot here. You could have replaced them with the Cybermen, and very little would have changed. You could have replaced them with the Sontarans, and they can time travel, like, and that's basically the extent of their role here. With the exception of one very awkward scene, when the Daleks have the Doctor cornered, mild spoilers, and the Doctor's like, oh, okay, I need to buy some time. Okay, Daleks, how do you know me? You know, humour me. This is my last request. And the Dalek says, very well, as you well know, Doctor, you are the enemy of the Daleks, and you have been ever since. And that is the most un-Dalek thing ever. And it's clearly, like, dangling the mystery of the Daleks and the Doctor in this particular time in the Doctor's life. Like, but it was so unnatural. It was so contrived. It was so... That was... What happened with that scene? I don't know. I enjoyed the rest of the story, but that particular scene was like, I don't know why you wrote that. But yeah, this is just a case of the Daleks are on the cover, and they're in, like, half of an episode, and they don't have much to do. So, okay, so those who criticised Big Finish when this cover first dropped, okay, you folks were right, but the time zones that the Doctor and Fade go to are really fun, and the way that they do end up dispatching of the Daleks in the end is very undoctorly, very aggressive, but I really liked it and really appreciated it. I thought it was very fun and very overkill. But the next story of Most Wanted, The Legend of Baba Yaga by Roshana Patel, is where things get a lot more interesting. So the Doctor lands in 17th century Russia. Basically, she's heard of this alien presence which on Earth is now going by Baba Yaga, which is a Slavic folklore witch character, who has managed to evade capture, evade detection from the Time Lords, and the Doctor wants to know how Baba Yaga is able to do this. But in the forest, and on her way to try and track down Baba Yaga, she comes across this young beautiful girl called Vasilisa, played by Sophie Shad, and it turns out that the Doctor is essentially, she's walked right into a fairy tale. She's walked into the fairy tale of Vasilisa the Beautiful, or Vasilisa the Fair. TLDR, Vasilisa the Fair is this story where you've got young Vasilisa, whose father loves her very much, but remarries this woman who's this horrible, evil, wicked stepmother, and one particularly harsh winter, the stepmother sends Vasilisa out in order to speak to Baba Yaga to try and get fire. But the stepmother's intention is, if she comes back with fire, great. If she doesn't, because she's eaten by Baba Yaga, that's great. I hated that lady anyway. So the Doctor and Vasilisa have to try and survive the elements, survive their way through the forest, and try and meet Baba Yaga, played by Jacqueline King.
Oh.
Yeah, encountering something impossible can be disorienting. The important thing is, you'll be warm, dry, and safe in here.
Will I?
Oh, probably. Let's check the scanner. That way we can have a quick look-see outside and... Yes! The horseman is moving off.
Oh, thank the Lord.
And I promise you, whatever else is out there, we are safe in here. Nothing can get through those doors.
Good. But I have to ask, are you the Baba Yaga?
What? No! Why would you think that?
Well, a woman with second sight and impossible powers, living in a magical hut, ancient, wise, and terrible?
Hey, lesser the ancient. I mean, I am, but this body don't show it. See? Not a single grey hair.
We may not be her, but I think perhaps you're something akin to her?
I'm going to level with you folks here. We're 2 stories into this Fugitive Doctor range, and with this story, we've already got like a 10 out of 10 story. Like, Rashana Patel has like hit it out of the park with this one. It's this really effectively paced fairy tale story which the Doctor has literally like landed right in the middle of. That's ultimately a story about identity, about the Fugitive Doctor's identity. In the Vasilisa the Fair fairy tale, Vasilisa has got this doll that protects her in the forest and protects her from Baba Yaga. And you think maybe going into it, okay, so is the Fugitive Doctor in this story, is she Vasilisa's doll? But no, maybe not. Maybe the Fugitive Doctor is like an allegory of Baba Yaga herself. You know, this, otherworldly creature with mythical powers, with knowledge of the future, a second sight, as Vasilisa calls it, who also has this magical mystery hut. Or, alternatively, maybe the Fugitive Doctor is actually more akin to Vasilisa, a persecuted female figure throughout history who's trying to find her place. It's really interesting. The Legend of Baba Yaga is an hour of audio that the more you think about it, the more interpretations you sort of try and impose on it, the more rewarding it becomes. Like, the more like depths it continues to unearth, the further you dig. But it's also a story where the Doctor is essentially like tested in regards to the way she sees the universe and her ideology of like science being the be all and end all. As with Baba Yaga, she's encountering like magic or technology that she can't really wrap her head around. And Baba Yaga, this like mystery figure, like this sort of like evil, mysterious wench with like metal teeth, with like extended limbs and a big nose, and like she doesn't sit down like in her hut, she sits on top of her cauldron as she's cooking supper, and like she threatens to eat everything. Jacqueline King is like having an absolute riot. She's so fun in this story. She's like chewing the scenery with those like metaphorical metal teeth. But she works as an antagonist for the Fugitive Doctor, an incarnation who will shoot first or punch first and then maybe ask questions later depending on the scenario. And that's not an option here with Baba Yaga. Like, there's no way she can really be overpowered. And like, what is Baba Yaga? Is she an alien? Is she like a Time Lord? Is she a Carrionite? Is she something from the Dark Times? Like who knows? Like, and when the story does sort of like reveal what's going on here, and we sort of like piece this together and learn this as the Doctor is expositing it towards the end, It's really clever stuff. It's really effective. And like if you listen to it again, like the crumbs are there, you know, the clues are there if you listen to them. But the dialogue is so strong. The interactions between the Doctor and Vasilisa are like really, really like lovely to listen to, particularly when she's shown the TARDIS for the first time. Like some really lovely, wonderful scenes there. Like great companionship here. Like these two have a genuine bond, and Joe Martin and Sophie Shad have like some real chemistry with each other. They work so well together as a Doctor companion pairing. And I think like in Most Wanted, like the box set generally, I think there are some like deliberate gender politics happening here. Like with you, like you had Fade in the first story, and you've got Vasilisa in this one, and you've got here a female Doctor who is a fugitive from her own people, and she's trying to right moral wrongs, and in this case with a female folklore heroine who at one point in the story she takes by the hand and literally walks through fire with her. It's such a powerful moment. That scene's brilliant. And Joe Martin, she's like monologuing and explaining what's going on in that scene and the themes of the story. Really, really effective stuff. Like, you know, punch the air, celebratory, triumphant moments of exposition and of like celebration for the character. Really, really great stuff. I love this story, The Legend of Baba Yaga. Like, it's a really, really effective metatextual analysis of the Fugitive Doctor as a character, her role in her own fairy tale, on the run from her own people. Yeah, really great stuff. And like the encounters between like Joe Martin and Jacqueline King as the Doctor and Baba Yaga respectively. Really great stuff, like really gets under the Doctor's skin as well. There's a really great line where Baba Yaga has second sight and is able to read her mind and like sort of toy with her and like really play with the idea and twist the knife of the idea that the Fugitive Doctor, like not even her own people want her, and that they chain her up and throw her away at the first opportunity they get. And that clearly hurts this Doctor. And I think that adds so many dimensions to this incarnation. And I really hope that those dimensions are explored and tested in future stories. But I think, intentionally or not, Roshana Patel has laid some brilliant groundwork for the character in this story. And I really, really hope that in future box sets, other writers can sort of pick up that baton and play with that element of the character. Because I think that's where the most interesting stuff is going to be with this incarnation. You can't, like, plant your flag firmly on where this Doctor is going to be set in like the chronology of the character, but what you can do is you can still test the character in those circumstances that she presently finds herself in. And you don't have to tie it to pre-Hartnell, to War Games, whatever. If you play with that environment that she's in now, you can get a lot of mileage out of this character. And the last story we have from the box set is The Dimension of Lost Things by Lisa McMullen. The story opens with Cosmogon chasing the Doctor through the vortex, and the Doctor decides to pull some insane maneuvers and essentially gets sucked down a temporal plug hole and falls into a pocket dimension, which is the titular Dimension of Lost Things, where the landscape and all of the items in this dimension, in this great big vast wasteland, are items and things and souls that have been literally lost. The landscape is littered with keys and phones and wallets, and there's also lost souls in this valley where people have just given up and lost themselves. You've also got people who live in this dimension. You've got Athelia, played by Nneka Okoye, and you've also got George Mallory, played by Matt Wycliffe. Now, George Mallory was a mountaineer who attempted to climb Everest in 1924 and never came back down the mountain. He was missing and presumed dead. And according to Doctor Who, he wound up in this dimension. But Athelia and George are not the only people living here. The Doctor encounters another version of herself. She's seeing double. It's up to these two versions of the Fugitive Doctor, George and Athelia, to try and escape this dimension, and Cosmogon is right behind them as well, still giving chase.
I'm you. You a year older. I remember this meeting like it was tomorrow.
This is worse than altitude sickness.
Shh. Let her talk.
Two of you. This is bizarre.
We're the same person at different points in our time stream.
Oh, well, yes, that clears everything up.
You've been here a year, waiting for this moment, waiting for you.
Why don't we know about this? Bevan, did she say anything to you?
It's complicated, and this place has messed with your minds enough. Yeah. What exactly is this place?
Close that. Keep the winds out.
You fell through a crack in the vortex into another dimension. This place is a dimension of all things lost. The entire landscape is made from misplaced objects and places falling through holes in space, time.
Not just physical things. That valley you wandered into, full of lost souls. This place is peopled by the missing. Everyone in this camp comes from somewhere different. Planets, galaxies I've never even heard of.
Certain points of the universe are particularly fragile. People, objects, things disappear and turn up here.
The Dimension of Lost Things is a really interesting story. I'm not sure if I like it or not. I'm a bit like Benoit Blanc in like Knives Out. Like, it makes no damn sense, but it compels me though. I think there's some very interesting ideas, particularly what this second Doctor's deal is. Like, I think that was a really, really great idea in regards to like another layer, another element to the Fugitive Doctor's character. I thought that was very, very interesting, but obviously I can't get into spoilers here. And I think that the idea of this, literally this dimension where lost things exist, including, and this is what kind of compels the Doctor to stay in this dimension for as long as she can, including potentially lost memories, because the Doctor's trying to figure out what does Division want with her, what memories, what knowledge or experience or whatever, what does she have in her mind that the Time Lords and Division are so desperately after, and she's hoping that maybe she can find it in this dimension. And I think the idea of lost or missing people turning up here as well, like in the case of George Mallory, I think it's an interesting idea, but it almost feels like that should have been an idea in and of itself, kind of like Girl Deconstructed from the Ninth Doctor Respond to All Calls box set. It feels like an idea like a missing mountaineer on Everest, winding up in this dimension where all lost things go. That's like a story on its own that you could really play with the morality of. Here it kind of feels like, oh, here's a Doctor Who twist on like a historical figure. I don't know. I don't know if that part particularly worked for me, even though I thought that Matt Wycliffe did a really good job with the role. And Athelia is an okay character. The most interesting part is that she's got a talking squirrel as like a best friend. And, you know, that was kind of it in regards to her character there for me. What kind of held the Dimension of Lost Things together for me was like the more cerebral, like experimental, like almost sort of, as pretentious as this sounds, like almost avant-garde elements of the story, like when the Doctor's sort of like in her own mind trying to find her memories, and she's in this desolate wasteland trying to find herself, and she's screaming at these monsters and demons in the void, shouting like, I see you but I do not fear you. And like Jo Martin's like really belting it and really giving it her all. Like, she's really, really strong in this story. Amazing performance, and it honestly kind of gave me chills, like how hard she was like going for it. But I kind of wish it was more in service of a more like interesting immediate narrative. Like, it is sort of more experimental. It is sort of more like down to interpretation and more about vibes and like existentialism. And, you know, that's really cool. But I do wish that like the more immediate stakes of the story were a little bit clearer. Like I said, Cosmogon's not a particularly interesting threat. Like, I know that she managed to track him down into this dimension here, but she doesn't have a lot to do when she's actually here. And I thought that the actual ending itself, you know, when they get out of the dimension and they have the goodbye and the coda and stuff, that was basically generic Doctor Who stuff. I kind of think that there's a really like some really great ideas in this story. They're just sort of like struggling to get to the surface here. It was some really interesting themes and ideas, and I think that the most interesting part is the multi-Doctor angle here. But even that can kind of only take the story so far. But it does lay some interesting groundwork in regards to who Division are and also what they're capable of and what their resources are. Like, that's really interesting. But overall, while I think the Dimension of Lost Things is really interesting conceptually, Fast Times is a really strong introductory story for the Fugitive Doctor, and The Legend of Baba Yaga is like this really, really interesting and fascinating deep dive into the Fugitive Doctor as a character and potential parallels with like folklore and fairy tales. I adored The Legend of Baba Yaga. I've listened to it twice. I normally don't do that when I go into these reviews unless like there's a big twist or like I really need to listen to it again because it's so dense or like. But The Legend of Baba Yaga I listened to like twice just for fun. I loved it so much, and there's just a really strong dynamic between the Doctor and Vasilisa, just as there is a really strong dynamic between the Fugitive Doctor and Fade in Fast Times. It's a really strong box set overall. And like I mentioned earlier, Jo Martin comes right out of the gate in such a strong, powerful and assured performance of this incarnation of the Doctor that is entirely her own and entirely unique. And I genuinely cannot wait to hear more from her. I think it's such an incredible debut for her as like a performer, as an actor. And I'm really looking forward to July when the next box set comes out, The Fugitive Doctor, Dead or Alive, which will see stories from Sing Heya, Aaron Douglas, and Tim Foley. Really, really looking forward to this coming out in the summer. But for now, yeah, I do recommend picking up The Fugitive Doctor Most Wanted. At least, like, you know, give it a go. Because I think for some, you might not be into it. But I've got a feeling that for quite a few of you, you may have like found your new Big Finish Doctor Who range, and I'm super happy for you folks. But yeah, that was my review of Doctor Who, The Fugitive Doctor Most Wanted. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of it if you've listened to it. Also, hit the like button while you're down there, subscribe if you haven't already, and folks, I'll see you all next time.